Testing, testing. Hi, my name is Claudia, and this is Art for Embodied Liberation. And I wanted to talk today about the movie Obsession, which is a very triggering and difficult movie to watch, but I think it's really important because it's causing a lot of discussion about consent and what dynamics exist and do not exist in the context of a loving relationship. Um, so I want to use the definition of Bell Hooks in her book All About Love for context, because I think she does a really good job of raising the bar on love. And let's get into what that means. I want to share that with you because I think that is really missing from the discussion. So, love is a verb. Love is not passive. It's not something you fall into. It's something you practice. It's something done on purpose. In the movie Obsession, Bear is very passive, and this is seen as misinterpreted by some folks as some kind of like gentleness. But actually, love has teeth, it has courage, it is authentic, it is willing to say yes and no clearly. It is consensual and it seeks to understand. So, all of these actions take courage, they require action, and they require to back words with action. So, there has to be a congruence between the words and the actions in order for love to exist. So, the reason why I think Obsession used the word love, or the way it's shown in the story, is that this is the character Bear's misinterpretation of what love is. He thinks it is romance. He thinks it is lust. He thinks that it is ownership, which is a form of violence. So that goes into a very important point that Bell Hooks makes in her book, is that love and abuse cannot coexist. So true love provides a safe environment for growth. It cannot exist alongside manipulation, neglect, or harm. And so again, going back to Bear's refusal to put his feelings out on the table, this prevents him from growing into potentially being better at loving, whether it would be as a friend or as a partner, depending on what Nikki chooses to do. But because he lacks the courage to just simply talk about his feelings, ask her about her feelings, or be curious about her honestly in any way, he does not have any of the foundational virtues of what would be required of him for love. So that's why when he makes the wish on the One Wish Willow, the love is actually something quite horrifying, because that would be the natural eventuality of his desires, because they're rooted in a lot of avoidance. Clearly, he sees Nikki as a sexual object, and a lot of folks who don't also have a clear view of what love really is, who don't know how to distinguish between love and lust or love and harm, those actions are not at all rooted in love. So if anybody uses love to describe coercion, ownership of the other, or any kind of manipulation, lies, or actual avoidance, which is a form of violence, to avoid doing the right thing for the other, that's not love. And it's actually harm. It's actually on the spectrum of abuse. And in the movie, he does actively abuse her because he never has the courage to seek consent with anyone he's interested in. Which leads to the next one, that self-love is the foundation. So he does not love himself. He doesn't know himself. He puts a lot of energy into external validation, and he puts a lot of emotional labor onto this idea of who Nikki is or who Sarah is or his idea of other people. So rather than actually behaving in such a way that someone who loves themselves would behave, like taking care of their hygiene, taking care of their home, taking care of their business, their responsibilities, following through for themselves, in the absence of that, that's not somebody who loves themselves. So it's another distortion that Bear shows, is that he is not in line with what love is because he does not love himself. So childhood shapes our love ethic. We don't know anything about Bear's childhood, but trauma and conditioning imprint our template for adult love. So a lot of conditioning that we see is from media, including social media, including rom-coms, and they've done us all a disservice because they're very external. They focus on physical attributes, they focus on the pursuit of a person, but then they make it seem as though everything will kind of resolve itself on its own in a passive way. Whereas true love requires consistent upkeep and care, sacrifice. It's a sacred obligation to the other. Bell Hooks says the spiritual investment in the other. So while others invest in us, ideally, when we have good caregivers who actually love us, in the absence of that, we need to find ways of filling that cup. And unfortunately, a lot of folks who don't receive the love that they need and deserve, they fill the cup with a hostile view of what, an incorrect view of what love is, and think that lust and conquest will replace love, but that is not love at all. So in a lot of the reviews of Obsession, I've heard the word love used for so many things that do not describe love. They are using love to describe lust or obsession or conquest or domination, and those are not love. Those are not active, mutually beneficial. They're not courageous, and they're not moving in a place of consent. And then lastly, Bell Hooks, in her book, All About Love, says that patriarchy distorts connections because patriarchal conditioning forces men to emotionally withdraw and withhold, which Bear does a lot of. Conversely, it pushes women into emotionally caretaking, which definitely happens in the movie. Nikki bears all of the burden of his lack of emotional growth in a very horrific way. And so if you are tenderhearted like I am, just know that it's a huge trigger warning. But I also really appreciate these conversations because all of the conditioning that we've had as a society in the US has been that domination and subservience are somehow ingredients to love. And this movie shows how those actually exist in the horrifying reality that we've seen when people pretend to engage in friendship, but they have ulterior motives and they're unclear about that, and they kind of try to manipulate the circumstance or things like that. I mean, women, femmes, and thems have existed for a long time, having to navigate these deceptions, and I just am here to tell you that that is not love, and it cannot turn into love. And in fact, love and coercion and these features of abuse cannot coexist. Deception, anything that is a feature of abuse is not love. So thank you so much for watching. If you're interested, I'm going to show more content about art making myself. Like, I like to make visual art, but I do also believe that media exists in a way that could be really beneficial to help us grow and evolve as a society. So I am really excited about this conversation. It's been a long time coming because there's been so many since my childhood movies about the conquest, the domination, the lack of autonomy, the lack of equal power. But love actually exists on equal footing and equality and shared responsibility and shared decision making. And there is growth in that by putting that out there. It's hard to do, but it helps us grow. It always takes a lot of courage. But in the absence of that courage, there is no growth. So while finding someone who will actually consent to loving us is difficult, it is so much more worthwhile than to try to force things in such a way that are more abuse and just a reflection of the external rather than the depth that can go into the growth that love provides. So I'm always thankful to Bell Hooks. She's a wonderful teacher when it comes to love. And if you haven't read her book, I highly recommend it. But I want to invite, especially those that are confused about obsession or within themselves, what actually is love. When we're talking about it, what is that? She raises the bar and she specifies, so it's really helpful. So thank you. Peace out. Bye.